The bullet whistled past Diana Oakley's ear so close she felt the heat of it. And in that split second before she dove behind the water trough, she understood that her past had finally caught up with her in the most unforgiving territory of all. It was June of 1882, and Circleville, Utah had been her sanctuary for exactly 8 months, long enough for her to believe she might actually escape the shadows that had chased her from Kansas City. The town sat nestled in a high mountain valley, surrounded by red rock cliffs that glowed like embers at sunset. And for those brief months, she had worked at the general store, kept her head down, and tried to forget that she had once been someone else entirely. But the 3 men who had just ridden into town were proof that forgetting was a luxury women like her could never afford. Diana pressed herself against the rough wooden slats of the trough, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The water inside sloshed with her movement, and she could hear the heavy footsteps of boots on the dusty main street, hear the jingle of spurs and the unmistakable sound of a rifle being cocked. She had no weapon, no plan, and no idea how she was going to survive the next 5 minutes. Diana Oakley, the voice that called out, belonged to Marcus Grimes, a bounty hunter she had hoped never to see again. "We know you're here, girl. Your brother wants you home, and he's paying good money to make that happen." Her stomach turned to ice. Of course it was her brother. Of course Raymond had sent men after her. He had always been determined to control every aspect of her life. And when she had fled in the middle of the night with nothing but the clothes on her back and the money she had saved from years of secret work at the dressmaker's shop, she had known he would not let her go easily. Raymond Oakley was a powerful man in Kansas City, a banker with connections that stretched across 3 states, and he had built his reputation on the idea that his family was respectable, controllable, and entirely under his thumb. Diana's escape had threatened that reputation, and men like Raymond did not tolerate threats. Another shot rang out, splintering the wood just above her head, and Diana realized with sudden clarity that Marcus Grimes was not interested in taking her back alive. Dead or alive, the bounty was the same, and a dead woman could not tell tales about why she had run in the first place. She looked around desperately for an escape route. The main street of Circleville was wide and exposed, lined with wooden buildings that offered little cover. To her left was the saloon, to her right the blacksmith shop, and directly across from her was the livery stable where she could see horses shifting nervously in their stalls. If she could make it to the stable, she might be able to steal a horse and ride out before Grimes and his men could stop her. It was a slim chance, but it was the only chance she had. Diana gathered her skirts in one hand, took a deep breath, and ran. She made it 3 steps before she heard the shot. This one did not miss. The bullet caught her in the left shoulder, spinning her around and sending her crashing to the ground in a cloud of dust. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, a white-hot fire that spread from her shoulder down through her entire body. She tried to push herself up, tried to keep moving, but her left arm would not respond, and the world was starting to tilt and blur at the edges. Through the haze of pain, she saw a figure emerge from the shadows of the livery stable. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell to his collar, and a face that was all hard angles and sun-weathered skin. He wore the typical garb of a working cowboy, dusty leather chaps over worn denim, a faded blue shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his eyes. But what caught her attention was the gun belt slung low on his hips, and the way his hand hovered over the revolver with the ease of a man who knew exactly how to use it. "That's far enough," the cowboy said, his voice carrying across the street with quiet authority. He was not shouting, but something in his tone made the words feel like a command that could not be ignored. Marcus Grimes laughed, a harsh sound that grated against Deanna's ears. "This is none of your concern, friend. The woman is property of her family, and we're here to collect her." "She doesn't look like property to me," the cowboy said. He had not moved, had not drawn his weapon, but Deanna could see the tension in his stance, the way his body was coiled and ready. "She looks like a woman who's been shot. That changes things considerably." "You don't want to get involved in this," Grimes said, his voice hardening. "There's 3 of us and one of you. Walk away while you still can." The cowboy tilted his head slightly, as if considering the offer. Then he smiled, a slow, dangerous expression that did not reach his eyes. "I appreciate the advice, but I think I'll stay. My name's Porter Young, and I've got a particular dislike for men who shoot women in the back." Everything happened fast after that. Grimes went for his gun, and Porter moved like lightning, his revolver clearing leather and firing in one smooth motion. The shot took Grimes in the chest, and he went down hard, his weapon clattering uselessly to the ground. The other 2 men hesitated for just a second, and that second was all Porter needed. He fired twice more and both men fell, their guns unfired. The silence that followed was deafening. Deanna lay on the ground, her shoulders screaming in agony, and watched as Porter Young walked slowly toward the fallen men, checking each one to make sure they were no longer a threat. When he was satisfied, he holstered his weapon and turned his attention to her. "You're hit bad," he said, kneeling beside her. His hands were gentle as he examined the wound, but she could see the concern in his dark eyes. "Bullet went clean through, which is good, but you're losing a lot of blood. We need to get you to the doctor." "No doctor," Deanna managed to say through gritted teeth. "They'll ask questions." "Questions are the least of your problems right now," Porter said. He slipped one arm under her shoulders and the other under her knees, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing. "You can tell me the whole story later, but right now we need to stop this bleeding before you die on me." Deanna wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that involving himself in her problems would only bring him trouble, but the pain was too intense, and the world was fading too fast. She let her head fall against his chest, felt the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek, and surrendered to the darkness that was pulling her down. When Deanna woke, she was lying in a narrow bed in a room she did not recognize. The walls were rough-hewn logs chinked with mud, and the single window showed a view of red rock cliffs lit by the golden light of late afternoon. Her shoulder throbbed with a deep, persistent ache, but when she tried to move her arm, she found that it responded, which meant the damage was not permanent. Someone had bandaged the wound and dressed her in a clean white nightgown that smelled of lye soap and sunshine. "Easy now," a voice said from the corner of the room. Deanna turned her head and saw Porter Young sitting in a wooden chair, his hat resting on his knee. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and a shadow of stubble on his jaw. "You have been out for almost a day. Doc Murphy said you were lucky. An inch to the right and that bullet would have hit something vital." Deanna tried to sit up, but the movement sent a spike of pain through her shoulder and she gasped, falling back against the pillows. Porter was beside her in an instant, his hand on her good shoulder steadying her. "I said easy," he repeated, and there was something almost amused in his tone. "You're not going anywhere for at least a few days. Doctor's orders." "Where am I?" Deanna asked. Her throat was dry and her voice came out as a raspy whisper. "My place," Porter said. He reached for a cup on the bedside table and held it to her lips. "Drink. You need water." Deanna drank gratefully, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat. When she had finished, Porter set the cup aside and settled back into his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "You want to tell me why 3 bounty hunters were trying to kill you?" he asked. Diana closed her eyes, wishing she could disappear into the mattress. She had known this moment would come, had known that Porter Young would demand answers for his involvement in her disaster of a life. The question was how much to tell him. The truth was complicated and ugly, and she had spent the last 8 months trying to bury it so deep that it could never resurface. But Porter had saved her life, had put himself at risk for a stranger, and she owed him at least some version of honesty. "My brother wants me back in Kansas City," she said finally, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "He sent those men to retrieve me." "Your brother," Porter repeated, his tone flat. "And does your brother normally hire men to shoot his sisters?" "I imagine Marcus Grimes took liberties with his instructions," Deanna said. "Raymond would have wanted me alive, but men like Grimes have a habit of making their own decisions when things get complicated." "Why does your brother want you back so badly?" Deanna hesitated. This was the part she did not want to explain, the part that made her stomach twist with shame and anger. But Porter was watching her with those steady dark eyes, waiting, and she found that she could not lie to him. "He wants to marry me off," she said quietly, "to a business associate. A man named Herbert Whitmore who is 40 years old, twice widowed, and looking for a young wife to manage his household and bear his children. Raymond arranged the match without consulting me, and when I refused, he locked me in my room and told me I would come around eventually. So I ran." Porter's expression did not change, but Deanna saw his jaw tighten, saw the way his hands curled into fists on his knees. "How old are you?" he asked. 22, Deanna said. "Old enough to make my own choices, but apparently not old enough for my brother to respect them." "And this Herbert Whitmore, I'm guessing he's not the kind of man a woman would choose for herself." "He's not," Deanna said. She felt the familiar burn of tears behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. She had cried enough over the past months, had shed enough tears to fill a river, and she was tired of being weak. "He's cruel. I saw the way his first 2 wives looked at him, saw the bruises they tried to hide. When Raymond told me I was to marry Herbert, I knew I had to leave, because if I stayed, I would either become another broken woman in Herbert's household, or I would do something desperate." Porter was silent for a long moment, his gaze never leaving her face. Then he said very quietly, "You're safe here. Those men are dead and your brother doesn't know where you are. As long as you stay in Circleville, you'll be under my protection." "I can't ask you to do that," Deanna said. "You've already done more than enough. Raymond has money and influence. If he sends more men after me and they trace me here, you'll be in danger." "Let me worry about that," Porter said. He stood and crossed to the window, looking out at the red rock cliffs. "I've dealt with worse than angry brothers and hired guns. And besides, I don't take kindly to men who think they can control women like property. You ran because you had to, and that takes courage. I respect that." Deanna stared at his broad back, at the way his shoulders filled the window frame, and felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. It was not attraction, not exactly, though she could not deny that Porter Young was a handsome man. It was something deeper, something that felt like hope. For 8 months she had been alone, looking over her shoulder, waiting for the moment when her past would catch up with her. And now, impossibly, there was someone standing between her and that past, someone who seemed willing to fight for her even though he barely knew her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Porter turned from the window, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked uncertain. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe because I know what it's like to run from something you can't control. Maybe because I'm tired of watching bad men get their way. Or maybe because when I look at you, I see someone worth protecting." He paused, then added, "You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just rest and heal. Everything else can wait." Over the next week, Deanna slowly regained her strength. Porter's cabin was small but well kept, with a main room that served as both kitchen and living area, and two smaller rooms, one of which he had given over to her. He spent most of his days working at the nearby cattle ranch, leaving early in the morning and returning at dusk. And in his absence, Diana occupied herself with small tasks, sweeping the floor, preparing simple meals, trying to make herself useful despite the persistent ache in her shoulder. She learned that Porter was 28 years old, that he had been in Circleville for 3 years, and that he was saving money to buy his own piece of land where he could raise horses. He was a man of few words, but when he did speak, his words carried weight, and Deanna found herself listening carefully to every story he shared about his life on the range, about the hard work and simple pleasures of a cowboy's existence. She also learned that Porter Young was the kind of man who kept his promises. True to his word, he asked no more questions about her past, made no demands on her time or attention, and treated her with a respect that felt almost foreign after years of living under her brother's oppressive control. He was patient and kind, but there was also a strength in him, a quiet confidence that made Diana feel safer than she had felt in years. On the 8th day after the shooting, Diana woke to find Porter standing in the doorway of her room, holding a cup of coffee. "You're up early," she said, pushing herself into a sitting position. The movement still caused some discomfort, but the sharp pain had faded to a dull throb. "Couldn't sleep," Porter admitted. He crossed the room and handed her the coffee, then sat down on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "I've been thinking about your situation." Diana's stomach clenched. "What about it?" "Those bounty hunters had to have tracked you here somehow," Porter said. "Which means your brother knows you're in Circleville, or at least that you were here. Even with Grimes and his men dead, it's only a matter of time before more show up. You need a better plan than just hiding in my cabin." "I know," Deanna said quietly. She had been thinking the same thing, had lain awake at night trying to figure out a solution that did not involve running again. "I thought about moving on, going further west, maybe all the way to California. But I don't have enough money for the journey, and even if I did, there's no guarantee Raymond wouldn't find me there too." Porter nodded slowly. "That's what I figured, which is why I have a different idea." "What kind of idea?" "Marry me." Deanna choked on her coffee, coughing and sputtering as Porter quickly took the cup from her hands. "What? Marry me," Porter repeated, his expression serious. "If you're my wife, you'll have legal protection. Your brother can't force you to go back to Kansas City if you're married to someone else, and any bounty hunters who come looking will have to deal with me first. It's a practical solution." Deanna stared at him, her mind reeling. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious," Porter said. "Look, I know it's not a conventional proposal, and I'm not saying it would be a real marriage in all the ways that matter, but it would keep you safe, and that's what's important right now." "Porter, you barely know me," Deanna said. "Why would you tie yourself to a stranger just to protect her from her brother?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Porter said simply. "And because you deserve a chance to live your own life, not the one your brother has planned for you." He paused, then added, "I'm not asking you to love me or even to like me. I'm just offering you a way out, if you want it." Diana's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. The offer was insane, reckless, and completely impractical. But it was also the most selfless thing anyone had ever done for her. And as she looked into Porter's steady dark eyes, she realized that she believed him. He was not trying to manipulate her or control her. He was simply offering her a choice, and that choice felt like a lifeline. "I can't ask you to do this," she whispered. "You're not asking," Porter said. "I'm offering. There's a difference." Deanna closed her eyes, trying to think through the implications. If she married Porter, she would be giving up any hope of returning to the life she had known in Kansas City. Not that she wanted that life anyway. She would be binding herself to a man she had known for little more than a week, a man whose kindness seemed almost too good to be true. But what was the alternative? Running again, always looking over her shoulder, never knowing when Raymond would send more men to drag her back. "If I say yes," she said slowly, opening her eyes to meet his gaze, "what would you expect from me?" "Nothing you're not willing to give," Porter said. "You can keep sleeping in the spare room. You can spend your days however you like. I'll keep working at the ranch, and you'll have the freedom to decide what kind of life you want to build. The only thing I ask is that you be honest with me. If at any point you want to leave, you tell me, and I'll help you do it. No questions, no arguments." It was too generous, too good, and Deanna felt the familiar prickle of suspicion. Men did not offer women freedom without expecting something in return. But as she studied Porter's face, she saw no deception there, only a quiet sincerity that made her chest ache. "Why?" she asked again, because she needed to understand. "Why would you do this for me?" Porter was silent for a long moment, his gaze dropping to his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "5 years ago, my sister ran away from an arranged marriage. She was only 19, and my father was trying to marry her off to a man who had a reputation for violence. She begged me to help her, but I was young and stupid, and I thought my father knew best. So I did nothing. 3 months after the wedding, my sister died. The official story was that she fell down the stairs, but everyone knew the truth. Her husband beat her to death, and I did nothing to stop it." Deanna's breath caught in her throat. "Porter, I'm so sorry." "I don't want your sympathy," Porter said, looking up at her with eyes that were haunted. "I want to do what I should have done for my sister. I want to give you the choice she never had. So yes, this is partly about you, but it's also about me trying to make amends for the biggest mistake of my life. If that makes me selfish, so be it. But the offer stands. Marry me, and I'll keep you safe." Diana felt tears sting her eyes, but this time she did not try to hold them back. She understood now, understood the grief and guilt that drove Porter's offer, and she knew that turning him down would be both cruel and foolish. He was offering her freedom, and she would be a fool not to take it. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll marry you." Porter's expression did not change, but she saw the tension leave his shoulders, saw the way his hands unclenched. "All right then," he said. "I'll talk to the preacher this afternoon. We can do it tomorrow if you're feeling up to it." "Tomorrow is fine," Deanna said. She reached out with her good hand and touched his arm, feeling the warm, solid muscle beneath the fabric of his shirt. "Thank you, Porter, for everything." He covered her hand with his own, his palm rough and calloused from years of hard work. "You don't need to thank me. Just promise me one thing." "What?" "Promise me you'll tell me if you're ever unhappy. Promise me you won't run without talking to me first." Deanna nodded, her throat too tight for words. It was a promise she could keep, because for the first time in her life she felt like she had found someone who would actually listen. The wedding took place the following afternoon in the small white church at the edge of Circleville. There were no guests, no flowers, no elaborate ceremony. Just Diana in her best dress, which Porter had retrieved from her room at the boarding house, and Porter in a clean shirt and freshly polished boots, standing before Preacher Matthews and pledging to love and honor each other, until death did them part. Deanna spoke her vows in a voice that shook only slightly, and when Porter slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, she felt the weight of it like a promise. This was not the marriage she had imagined for herself, not the romantic fairy tale she had dreamed about as a girl. But as she looked up into Porter's serious face, she thought that maybe it was something better. Something real and honest and built on mutual respect rather than illusion. When Preacher Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Porter leaned down and kissed her gently on the forehead, a chaste gesture that somehow felt more intimate than any passionate embrace. Then he took her hand and led her out of the church into the bright Utah sunshine, and Diana realized that for the first time in her life, she was truly free. The first weeks of marriage were strange and awkward, a careful dance as Diana and Porter learned to navigate their new relationship. Porter continued to work long days at the ranch, and Diana occupied herself with maintaining the cabin and exploring the town. She found work at the general store again, which helped her feel useful and gave her a small income of her own. The owner, Mrs. Carmichael, was a kind older woman who asked no questions about Diana's sudden marriage and simply welcomed her back with a warm smile. In the evenings, Porter and Diana would sit together at the rough wooden table, sharing simple meals and talking about their days. The conversations were stilted at first, both of them uncertain how to be around each other now that they were legally bound. But gradually, as the days turned into weeks, they began to relax, to share stories and jokes and comfortable silences that felt almost natural. Diana learned that Porter had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, and that he was surprisingly well-read for a cowboy, with a small collection of books that he had accumulated over the years. He lent her his copy of Ivanhoe, and they spent several evenings discussing the story, debating the merits of various characters and arguing about the ending. It was during one of these discussions that Diana realized she was smiling more than she had in months, that the constant knot of anxiety in her chest had begun to loosen. But despite the growing ease between them, there was still a line they did not cross. Porter slept in the main room on a makeshift bed he had fashioned from blankets and a straw mattress, and Diana kept to the spare room. They were careful not to touch beyond the occasional brush of hands, careful to maintain the boundaries they had established. It was a marriage in name only, just as Porter had promised, and Diana told herself she was grateful for that. Except she was not entirely sure she was grateful anymore. It happened gradually, so slowly that Diana did not realize what was changing until it was too late to stop it. She found herself watching Porter when he did not know she was looking, noticing the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he chopped wood, the way his hair fell across his forehead when he bent over his books. She noticed the kindness in his eyes when he looked at her, the protective way he positioned himself between her and any potential threat when they walked through town. She noticed that his presence made her feel safe in a way she had never felt before, and that the sound of his voice could calm her racing heart. She was falling in love with her husband, and it terrified her. Because Porter had made it clear that their marriage was a practical arrangement, a solution to her problem rather than a romantic partnership. He had offered her freedom, not love, and she had no right to expect more from him. He was kind to her, respectful and considerate, but there was always a distance in his manner, a carefulness that suggested he was holding himself back. And Diana did not know if that was because he did not feel anything for her, or because he was trying to honor the agreement they had made. It all came to a head on a warm evening in late August, 2 months after their wedding. Diana had been helping Mrs. Carmichael inventory the storeroom, and by the time she walked back to the cabin, the sun was setting behind the red rock cliffs, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She found Porter sitting on the front porch, his back against the wall and his hat pulled low over his eyes. "You're home early," she said, climbing the steps to join him. "Finished early," Porter said without moving. "Boss let us go when we got the new fence line done." Deanna sat down beside him, careful to leave space between them. "It's a beautiful evening." "It is." They sat in silence for a while, watching the colors shift and deepen as the sun dipped lower. Deanna could feel the warmth radiating from Porter's body, could smell the familiar scent of leather and horse and honest sweat that clung to him. She wanted to close the gap between them, to lean her head against his shoulder and feel his arm come around her. But she did not know if he would welcome such a gesture, and the fear of rejection kept her frozen in place. "Deanna," Porter said finally, his voice low. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy here?" The question caught her off guard, and she turned to look at him. He had pushed his hat back, and she could see his face clearly now, could see the uncertainty in his eyes. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you seem different lately," Porter said. "Quieter. I want to make sure I'm keeping my promise to you." "If you're unhappy, if you want to leave, you need to tell me." "I don't want to leave," Deanna said quickly. "That's not it at all." "Then what is it?" Deanna took a deep breath, knowing that this was the moment when she had to be honest, even if that honesty cost her everything. "I'm happy," she said. "Too happy, that's the problem," Porter frowned. "I don't understand." "When we got married, you said it would be a practical arrangement," Deanna said, her words coming faster now. "You said you didn't expect anything from me except honesty. And I agreed to that because it made sense, because it was the smart thing to do. But Porter, somewhere along the way, things changed for me. I changed. And now I don't know how to be in this marriage anymore because it doesn't feel practical. It feels real." Porter was very still, his gaze locked on her face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I care about you," Deanna said, her voice barely above a whisper. "More than I should, more than you probably want me to. And I know that's not what you signed up for, so I understand if you want to end this arrangement. But you asked me to be honest, and this is the truth. I can't keep pretending that this is just a convenience for me, because it's not. Not anymore." The silence that followed was excruciating. Deanna watched a dozen emotions flicker across Porter's face, too fast for her to read, and she braced herself for rejection, for the gentle but firm reminder that they had made an agreement and she was breaking the terms. Instead, Porter reached out and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "You think you're the only one who changed?" he asked, his voice rough. "You think I've been sleeping on that damned uncomfortable bed for 2 months because I enjoy it?" "Deanna, I've been keeping my distance because I thought that's what you wanted. Because I thought if I let myself feel what I was feeling, I would be taking advantage of you." Diana's heart was racing so fast she could barely breathe. "What are you feeling?" "I'm feeling like I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life," Porter said. "I'm feeling like the best part of my day is coming home to you. I'm feeling like somewhere between carrying you to the doctor and watching you smile over a book, I fell completely in love with you. And I've been terrified to tell you because I didn't want to pressure you into something you didn't want." "You love me," Deanna whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "I love you," Porter confirmed. He lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, his lips warm against her skin. "I think I've loved you since the moment you looked up at me with blood on your dress and told me not to take you to the doctor because you didn't want to answer questions. You were so brave, so stubborn, and I knew right then that you were someone special." Deanna felt tears streaming down her face, but for once they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "I love you too," she said. "I love your kindness and your strength and the way you make me feel safe. I love the way you read books about knights and horses even though you're a cowboy. I love everything about you, and I've been so scared that you didn't feel the same way." Porter pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her and holding her tight against his chest. "You don't have to be scared anymore," he murmured into her hair. "I'm yours, Deanna, for as long as you'll have me." "Forever," Deanna said, pressing her face against his neck. "I want forever with you." Porter pulled back just enough to tilt her chin up, and then he was kissing her, really kissing her for the first time. His lips were soft but insistent, and Deanna melted into him, wrapping her good arm around his neck and kissing him back with all the emotion she had been holding inside. It was not a tentative kiss or a polite kiss. It was a kiss that spoke of love and desire and a future full of promise, and when they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I think we should move your things into the main bedroom," Porter said, his forehead resting against hers. "That bed is big enough for two, and I'm done sleeping on the floor." Deanna laughed, a sound of pure happiness that bubbled up from deep inside her. "I think that's an excellent idea." That night, for the first time since their wedding, Deanna and Porter shared a bed. They made love slowly and gently, Porter careful of her still healing shoulder, and afterwards they lay tangled together, talking and laughing until the early hours of the morning. Deanna felt like she was glowing from the inside out, like every cell in her body was singing with joy. This was what marriage was supposed to feel like, she realized. Not an obligation or a transaction, but a partnership built on love and trust and mutual desire. In the weeks that followed, Deanna and Porter settled into their new reality as a true married couple. The awkwardness disappeared, replaced by an easy intimacy that felt as natural as breathing. They held hands when they walked through town, stole kisses in the kitchen when they thought no one was looking, and spent their evenings wrapped in each other's arms, making plans for their future. Porter talked about buying land south of town, a piece of property with good grazing and a year-round stream, perfect for raising horses. Deanna talked about expanding the small vegetable garden behind the cabin, maybe even keeping chickens. They were simple dreams, practical dreams, but they were theirs, and that made them precious. But their happiness was not destined to last uninterrupted. In early September, a stranger rode into Circleville asking questions about Deanna Oakley. The bartender at the saloon, who was friendly with Porter, sent word immediately, and Porter came home that evening with his jaw set and his eyes hard. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "There's a man in town looking for you. Says he's a private investigator hired by your brother to confirm your whereabouts." Deanna felt her blood run cold. "Did he see me?" "Not yet," Porter said, "but it's only a matter of time. Circleville is too small to hide in for long." He crossed to her and took her hands, his grip firm and reassuring. "We need to confront this head-on. If we keep running, your brother will never stop sending people after you. But if we make it clear that you're my wife now, that you're legally protected and not going anywhere, maybe he'll back off." "You don't know Raymond," Deanna said, her voice shaking. "He doesn't back off. He doubles down. If we confront this investigator, Raymond will know exactly where I am, and he'll send more men, meaner men. Men who won't care that I'm married. Then we'll deal with them," Porter said. "Deanna, I'm not going to let anyone take you away from me. Not your brother, not some investigator, not anyone. But we can't keep living in fear. We need to stand our ground and show them that you're not a helpless woman they can push around anymore. You have me now, and I have friends here. People who will back us up if it comes to that." Deanna wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that they should pack up and leave tonight, head west where Raymond's reach could not extend. But as she looked into Porter's determined eyes, she realized that he was right. She was tired of running, tired of looking over her shoulder. And more than that, she trusted Porter to keep her safe. He had proven himself again and again, and she knew with absolute certainty that he would fight for her with everything he had. "All right," she said. "We'll stand our ground. But Porter, if things go wrong, if Raymond sends men who are more dangerous than Marcus Grimes, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll protect yourself first, Deanna said. I can't lose you, I won't. If it comes down to a choice between keeping me safe and keeping yourself alive, I need you to choose your own life. Porter's expression softened, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. I can't make that promise, he said quietly. Because there's no version of my life without you in it that's worth living. We're in this together, Deanna. Whatever comes, we face it together. Diana held on to him, her face pressed against his chest, and tried to draw strength from his certainty. She was still terrified, still convinced that confronting Raymond's investigator would bring disaster down on their heads. But she also knew that Porter was right. They could not keep running forever. At some point, they had to stand and fight for the life they were building together. The next morning, Porter and Deanna walked into town together to find the investigator. They did not have to look hard. He was standing outside the hotel, a thin man in an expensive suit with sharp eyes that missed nothing. When he saw Deanna, his expression did not change, but she saw the way his hand moved toward his jacket pocket, where she assumed he kept a weapon. "Miss Oakley," the investigator said, tipping his hat. "Or should I say Mrs. Young? I'm Walter Pierce, and I've been hired by your brother to locate you and ascertain your well-being." "I'm perfectly well, as you can see," Deanna said, keeping her voice steady despite the fear hammering in her chest. "I'm married now, Mr. Pierce, and I have no intention of returning to Kansas City. You can report to my brother that I'm safe and happy, and that he should stop sending men after me." "I'm afraid it's not that simple," Pierce said. "Your brother is concerned that you were coerced into this marriage, that you're being held against your will by this man." He nodded toward Porter, his lip curling slightly. "He's instructed me to offer you transportation back to Kansas City, where you can dissolve the marriage and return to your family." "I wasn't coerced," Deanna said firmly. "I married Porter of my own free will, and I have no intention of dissolving anything. I'm exactly where I want to be." "Even so, your brother feels it's his duty to ensure your safety," Pierce said. "He's prepared to involve the law if necessary. A woman of your class has no business living in a place like this, married to a common cowboy. Surely you can see that this situation is inappropriate." Deanna felt anger flare hot in her chest, burning away the fear. "What's inappropriate is my brother trying to control my life when I'm a grown woman capable of making my own decisions. I don't care what Raymond thinks is suitable. This is my life, and I choose to live it with Porter. Now please, leave Circleville and tell my brother that if he sends anyone else after me, I will involve the law myself. I'll file a formal complaint about harassment, and I'll make sure everyone in Kansas City knows exactly why I ran away in the first place." Pierce's eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening your brother, Miss Oakley?" "It's Mrs. Young," Porter said, speaking for the first time. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "And my wife isn't threatening anyone. She's stating facts. Now I suggest you get back on your horse and ride out of here before things get unpleasant." "Is that a threat, Mr. Young?" Pierce asked, his hand moving closer to his jacket. "It's a promise," Porter said. "You're not welcome here, and if you continue to harass my wife, you'll have more than just me to deal with. This town takes care of its own, and Diana is one of us now." As if to emphasize his point, several men emerged from the nearby buildings. Deanna recognized them as friends of Porter's, ranch hands and townspeople who had clearly been alerted to the situation. They did not say anything, but their presence was unmistakable, a silent show of solidarity that made Pierce take a step back. "This isn't over," Pierce said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "Your brother is a powerful man, Mrs. Young. He won't give up just because you married some cowboy." "Then you tell my brother this," Deanna said, stepping forward so that she was standing toe to toe with the investigator. "I am never coming back. Not for him, not for Herbert Whitmore, not for anyone. I would rather die than return to the life he planned for me. And if he truly cared about my well-being, he would respect my choice and leave me alone. But I know he doesn't care. He only cares about his reputation and his business deals. So you go back to Kansas City, and you tell him that Diana Oakley is dead. She died the night she ran away, and she's never coming back." Pierce stared at her for a long moment, and Deanna saw something like grudging respect flicker in his eyes. Then he tipped his hat, turned on his heel, and walked toward the livery stable where his horse was waiting. Deanna watched him go, her heart pounding, until he had mounted and ridden out of town, heading east. Only when he was out of sight did Deanna allow herself to sag against Porter, her legs suddenly weak. Porter caught her, holding her steady, and she felt the tension drain out of his body as well. "You were magnificent," he murmured into her hair. "I've never seen anyone stand up to a threat like that." "I was terrified," Deanna admitted, "but I meant every word. I'm not going back, Porter, no matter what Raymond does." "I know," Porter said. He tilted her chin up and kissed her gently. "And I'll be right here beside you. Whatever comes next, we face it together." The next few weeks passed in tense anticipation. Deanna and Porter both expected Raymond to make another move, to send more men, or to try some legal maneuver to force Deanna back to Kansas City. But as September turned to October and then November, nothing happened. There were no more investigators, no more bounty hunters, no threatening letters. It was as if Raymond had finally accepted defeat, or at least decided that Deanna was more trouble than she was worth. Gradually, Diana began to relax. She stopped looking over her shoulder every time she walked down the street, stopped flinching at the sound of approaching horses. The constant knot of anxiety in her chest loosened, and she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was truly free. Life in Circleville settled into a comfortable rhythm. Deanna continued working at the general store, and Porter kept his job at the ranch, but they also began making concrete plans for their future. Porter had been saving money for years, and with Diana's income added to his, they had enough for a down payment on the land he had been eyeing. In December, they finalized the purchase, acquiring 80 acres of beautiful high desert property with good water and plenty of grazing. They spent the winter months planning their ranch, drawing up blueprints for a house and a barn, debating the merits of different horse breeds. Porter wanted to focus on working horses, sturdy animals that could handle the rough terrain and harsh weather of Utah. Diana, who had discovered a love of gardening, wanted to set aside a portion of the land for crops, maybe even an orchard if the climate would support it. It was during one of these planning sessions, on a cold January evening in 1883, that Diana realized she had not had her monthly courses in several weeks. At first she thought it was simply stress or the change in weather, but as the weeks passed and still nothing happened, she began to suspect the truth. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with a mixture of joy and terror. She wanted children with Porter, wanted to build a family with him, but the timing felt wrong. They were still getting the ranch established, still dealing with the aftermath of her escape from Kansas City. Was this really the right moment to bring a baby into the world? But when she told Porter, his reaction left no room for doubt. His face lit up with such pure happiness that Diana felt her own fears dissolve. He swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing like a boy, and when he set her down, he kissed her with a passion that took her breath away. "We're going to be parents," he said, his voice full of wonder. "Diana, we're going to have a baby." "Are you sure this is what you want?" Deanna asked, needing to hear him say it. "We're only just starting to build the ranch. A baby will change everything." "A baby will make everything better," Porter said. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach, his expression turning serious. "I know it's going to be hard, and I know we'll have to adjust our plans. But Deanna, there's nothing I want more than to have a family with you. This baby is a gift, and I'm going to do everything in my power to be the best father I can be." Deanna felt tears sting her eyes, but they were happy tears this time. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Porter said. "Both of you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter and into the spring. Deanna continued working at the store until she became too large to comfortably stand for long periods, and then she focused her energy on preparing for the baby. She sewed tiny clothes from scraps of fabric. Porter built a cradle from smooth pine wood, and they transformed the spare room into a nursery, painting the walls a cheerful yellow and hanging curtains that Deanna had embroidered with wildflowers. They also began the work of building their ranch. Porter hired a crew to help construct a small house on their land. Nothing fancy but solid and well built, with 2 bedrooms, a main living area, and a covered porch that looked out over the red rock cliffs. They moved in during April, leaving the cabin in town behind, and Deanna felt like she was finally stepping into the future she had dreamed of. The baby came on a hot June evening, almost exactly 1 year after Deanna had been shot in the streets of Circleville. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Deanna was certain she would not survive it. But Porter stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and whispering encouragement, and when their son finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Deanna felt a love so fierce and overwhelming that it brought fresh tears to her eyes. "He's beautiful," Porter said, his voice choked with emotion as he cradled the tiny bundle. "Deanna, he's absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Deanna asked, exhausted but happy. Porter looked down at his son, his expression tender. "How about James, after my grandfather? He was a good man, and I always admired him." "James Young," Deanna said, testing the name. "I like it. James Porter Young." Porter's eyes widened. "You want to use my name as his middle name, of course," Deanna said. "You're his father, and you're the best man I know. I want our son to grow up knowing that." Porter leaned down and kissed her, gentle and sweet, and then he placed their son in her arms. Deanna looked down at James, at his tiny fingers and perfect little nose, and felt her heart expand with a love she had never known was possible. This was her family, she realized. This beautiful baby and this incredible man who had saved her life and given her everything she had ever wanted. This was what freedom felt like. The first year of James's life was a whirlwind of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and the constant learning curve of new parenthood. But it was also filled with moments of indescribable joy. Deanna loved watching Porter with their son, loved seeing the gentle way he held the baby, the silly faces he made to coax out a smile, the lullabies he sang in his rough but tender voice. Porter was a natural father, patient and loving, and James clearly adored him. The ranch thrived as well. Porter had purchased 6 horses to start with, sturdy Mustangs that he trained for saddle and ranch work. He had a gift for working with animals, a patience and understanding that made even the wildest horse trust him, and word quickly spread about the quality of his stock. By the time James turned 1, Porter had sold 4 horses for good prices and had orders for 6 more. They were not rich by any means, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. Deanna kept herself busy with the garden, which had flourished beyond her wildest expectations. The high desert climate was harsh, but with careful irrigation and the right crops, she was able to grow vegetables, herbs, and even a few fruit trees. She sold her excess produce at the general store, adding to their income, and she took pride in providing fresh food for her family. But the best moments were the quiet ones, the evenings when the three of them would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the cliffs, James babbling happily in Porter's arms while Deanna rested her head on his shoulder. These were the moments when Deanna felt truly at peace, when she could hardly believe that this was her life now, that she had gone from being a prisoner in her brother's house to being a free woman with a husband who loved her and a son who made every day an adventure. It was during one of these peaceful evenings, when James was almost 2 years old, that a letter arrived that threatened to shatter their happiness. Deanna recognized the handwriting on the envelope immediately. It was from her brother Raymond. Her hands shook as she opened it, her heart pounding with dread. Porter noticed her distress and came to stand beside her, reading over her shoulder as Deanna unfolded the single page. The letter was brief and to the point. Raymond wrote that he had received word of Diana's marriage and the birth of her son, and that after much consideration, he had decided to accept her choice. He would no longer pursue her or send men to retrieve her. However, he wanted Diana to know that she was no longer welcome in Kansas City, that he had told their extended family she had died in a tragic accident, and that if she ever returned, he would not acknowledge her. As far as Raymond was concerned, his sister was dead, and he intended to keep it that way. The letter ended with a single line that made Diana's blood run cold. "I hope you are satisfied with the life you have chosen, Deanna. You have given up everything our family built for a life of poverty and obscurity. I only hope you do not come to regret it." Diana read the words 3 times, trying to process the mixture of emotions they evoked. Relief that Raymond was finally leaving her alone, anger at his condescension and cruelty, and a strange sadness that she would never see her family again, even though that family had never truly valued her. "He's done with you," Porter said quietly, taking the letter from her hands. "This is good news, Deanna. It means you're finally free." "I know," Deanna said, "but it also means that as far as my entire family is concerned, I'm dead. My cousins, my aunts and uncles, everyone I grew up with, they all think I'm gone." "You are gone," Porter said. "The Diana Oakley they knew doesn't exist anymore. You're Diana Young now, and you have a new family. Me and James. And maybe, if we're lucky, more children in the future. That's what matters. Not some people in Kansas City who never appreciated you." Deanna knew he was right, but the knowledge did not make the sting any less painful. She had always known that leaving Raymond meant leaving her entire old life behind, but seeing it spelled out so bluntly in his letter made it feel horribly final. She was truly alone in the world except for Porter and James. As if sensing her distress, Porter wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close. "You're not alone," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "You have me, and I'm never going anywhere. You have James. You have friends here in Circleville who care about you. You have a life that's yours, built on your own terms. That's worth more than all the family connections in the world." Deanna pressed her face against his chest and let herself cry, mourning the family she had lost and the life she would never have. But even as she cried, she knew Porter was right. She had built something real and beautiful here in Utah, something that no amount of money or social standing could match. She had love and she had freedom, and she had a future full of promise. When her tears finally subsided, she pulled back and looked up at Porter with a watery smile. "You're right," she said. "I have everything I need right here. Raymond can keep his money and his reputation. I don't want any of it." "That's my girl," Porter said, and he kissed her forehead. "Now let's burn this letter and never speak of it again. The past is dead, Deanna. It's time to focus on the future. They burned the letter that night in the fireplace, watching the paper curl and blacken until it was nothing but ash. And with it, Deanna felt the last threads connecting her to her old life dissolve. She was truly Deanna Young now, wife and mother, and she would never look back. The years that followed were the happiest of Deanna's life. James grew into a bright, curious boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. He loved the horses and followed Porter around the ranch like a devoted shadow, learning to ride almost before he could walk properly. Deanna watched her son and husband together and felt her heart swell with pride and love. When James was 3, Deanna discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news was met with less surprise and more quiet joy. They knew what to expect now, knew the sleepless nights and the exhaustion, but they also knew the incredible reward that came with a new baby. Their second child, a daughter they named Lily Rose, arrived in the spring of 1886, and she was as different from her brother as night from day. Where James was bold and adventurous, Lily was thoughtful and gentle, with a quiet grace that reminded Deanna of herself. Porter adored both his children equally, but there was something special about the way he looked at Lily, a tenderness that made Deanna's heart ache in the best possible way. He would spend hours holding her, singing to her, telling her stories about brave princesses and noble knights. And Lily would gaze up at him with absolute trust and adoration, her tiny hand wrapped around his finger. The ranch continued to prosper. Porter's reputation as a horse trainer spread throughout the territory, and he had more clients than he could handle. They hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, young men who were hardworking and respectful. And the operation expanded to include not just horses, but also a small herd of cattle. Deanna's garden grew as well, and she began teaching other women in town about sustainable farming techniques, becoming something of an expert on high desert agriculture. But more important than the financial success was the life they had built together. Their home was filled with laughter and love, with family dinners and bedtime stories and lazy Sunday afternoons on the porch. They had friends in town, people who had become like family, and they were respected members of the community. Deanna served on the church committee. Porter helped organize the annual town rodeo, and their children were well loved by everyone who met them. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Porter surprised Deanna with a gift. It was a small wooden box, beautifully carved with images of horses and wildflowers. Inside was a deed to an additional 40 acres adjacent to their property, expanding their ranch to 120 acres total. "I know you've been wanting more space for the garden," Porter said as Deanna stared at the deed in shock. "And I figured with the kids getting older, we could use the extra land for them to explore and play. Plus, there's a nice flat area on the new section that would be perfect for building a bigger house someday when this one gets too small." Deanna looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Porter, this is too much. How did you afford this?" "I've been saving," Porter said with a shrug. "And I sold that big black stallion to the rancher up north for a very good price. I wanted to do something special for our anniversary, something that would help us keep building the life we've dreamed about." Deanna set the box aside and threw her arms around his neck, kissing him with all the love and gratitude she felt. "You're amazing," she said. "I don't know what I did to deserve you, but I thank God every day that you came into my life." "I'm the lucky one," Porter said, holding her tight. "You took a chance on a cowboy who offered you a marriage of convenience, and you turned it into something real. You gave me a family and a purpose and a reason to get up every morning with a smile on my face. I love you, Deanna, more than I ever thought it was possible to love another person." "I love you too," Deanna said. "So much it scares me sometimes. I look at you and the kids and this life we've built, and I can't believe it's real. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for someone to take it all away." "Nothing's going to take this away," Porter promised. "We've fought too hard for it. And even if challenges come, we'll face them together, just like we always have." As if to prove his point, James came running into the room at that moment, followed by Lily, who was toddling along as fast as her chubby legs could carry her. "Papa, Mama, come see. There's a new foal in the barn." Porter and Diana exchanged a glance, then laughed and followed their children outside. The foal was indeed beautiful, a little bay filly with a white star on her forehead, and James was already declaring that she was going to be the fastest horse in all of Utah when she grew up. Porter lifted Lily up so she could see over the stall door, and Deanna watched them all with a full heart. This was her life now, not the grand society existence her brother had envisioned for her, not the comfortable but suffocating world of Kansas City high society, but something infinitely better. A life of hard work and simple pleasures, of love that grew deeper with each passing year, of children who would grow up knowing they were cherished and valued for who they were, not who someone else wanted them to be. Diana thought back to that day 5 years ago when she had told Porter she could not be the woman he needed, when she had been so certain that she was broken and damaged and incapable of being a proper wife. And she remembered his response, the words that had changed everything. "You're the woman I choose." He had been right. She was not perfect, and their life was not perfect, but it was theirs, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine love. And that was worth more than all the perfection in the world. The years continued to pass in a blur of growth and change. James started school in town, riding there each morning on his own pony, a gentle mare that Porter had trained specifically for him. Lily followed 2 years later, though she was more interested in books and drawing than in outdoor adventures. Diana discovered that she had a talent for teaching and began offering informal lessons to some of the younger children in town whose families could not afford formal schooling. When James was 10 and Lily was 7, Diana found herself pregnant once more. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2, leaving her exhausted and ill for months. Porter was worried, hovering over her constantly and insisting she rest, but Diana insisted on maintaining as normal a routine as possible. She refused to be an invalid, even when her body seemed determined to prove her wrong. Their third child, another son they named Daniel, arrived in October of 1893 after a labor that left Diana weak and shaken. But when she held her new baby, felt his warm weight in her arms, and saw his perfect little face, she knew that all the discomfort had been worth it. Daniel was a surprise, an unexpected blessing that completed their family in a way Diana had not realized they needed. Porter cried when he held Daniel for the first time, tears streaming down his weathered face as he cradled his youngest son. "I thought I couldn't love anything more than I already loved our family," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But somehow my heart just keeps expanding. How is that possible?" "That's what love does," Deanna said softly. "It grows and changes and makes room for more." "That's what you taught me, Porter. Before I met you, I thought love was finite, something that had to be earned and could be taken away. But you showed me that real love is infinite. It just keeps giving, and there's always more." James and Lily were fascinated by their new baby brother, hovering over the cradle and fighting over who got to hold him. Deanna watched her children together and felt a deep satisfaction. They were a real family now, complete and whole, and she knew that no matter what challenges they faced in the future, they would face them together. The ranch continued to thrive, becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. Porter had gained a reputation not just as a horse trainer, but as a fair employer and a pillar of the community. He was asked to serve on the town council, a position he accepted with humility and dedication. Deanna expanded her teaching, eventually establishing a small school in an unused building in town, where she taught children of all ages reading, writing, and arithmetic. They were not wealthy by the standards of Diana's old life in Kansas City, but they were comfortable and respected. More importantly, they were happy. Their children grew up healthy and strong, surrounded by love and given every opportunity to pursue their interests. James developed his father's love of horses and showed a natural talent for training them. Lily discovered a passion for art and spent hours sketching the red rock landscapes that surrounded their home. Daniel, as he grew, proved to be a natural storyteller, entertaining the family with elaborate tales of adventure and heroism. On the evening of their 10th wedding anniversary, Deanna and Porter left the children with a trusted neighbor and rode out to a favorite spot on their property, a high ridge that overlooked the entire valley. They watched the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, painting the red rocks in colors that seemed almost unreal. "Do you ever regret it?" Porter asked quietly, his arm around Diana's shoulders. "Giving up your old life for this?" Deanna turned to look at him, at the man who had saved her life and given her everything she had ever wanted. His face was more lined than it had been 10 years ago, marked by years of hard work under the harsh Utah sun. But his eyes were the same, warm and kind and full of love, and when he looked at her, she still felt her heart skip a beat. "Not for a single second," she said. "This life, our life, is everything I ever dreamed of and so much more. You gave me freedom, Porter. You gave me the chance to choose who I wanted to be, and every single day I choose this. I choose you, and our children, and this ranch, and this beautiful wild place we call home. I choose all of it, and I would choose it again 1,000 times over." Porter pulled her close and kissed her, a long, slow kiss that tasted of love and promise and a decade of shared memories. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I love you, Deanna Young," Porter said. "More now than I did the day we married, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today. That's my promise to you. For as long as I live, my love for you will just keep growing." "I love you too," Deanna said, "and I always will. You're not just the man I needed, Porter. You're the man I wanted, the man I chose, and the man I'll choose every day for the rest of my life." They sat together on that ridge until the stars came out, holding each other and talking about their dreams for the future. They talked about watching their children grow up, about eventually having grandchildren, about growing old together in the house they had built with their own hands. They talked about the life they had created from nothing but determination and love, and they marveled at how far they had come. When they finally rode back to the house, they found all 3 children asleep in James's room, curled up together like puppies. Porter carefully carried each child to their own bed while Deanna watched from the doorway, her heart full to bursting. This was her family, she thought. These beautiful children and this incredible man who had given her everything. This was what happiness looked like. The years continued to flow like water, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. James grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with a natural way with horses that made him invaluable on the ranch. When he turned 18, Porter made him a full partner in the business, acknowledging that the ranch's success was as much James's doing as his own. James accepted the responsibility with pride and dedication, working side by side with his father to continue building what they had started. Lily blossomed into a talented artist whose paintings of the Utah landscape began to attract attention beyond Circleville. A gallery owner from Salt Lake City saw some of her work at the county fair and offered to represent her, and soon Lily's paintings were being sold to collectors throughout the territory. She used her earnings to travel, to see more of the world and expand her artistic horizons, but she always came back to Circleville, to the family and the land that inspired her work. Daniel inherited his mother's love of teaching and decided to pursue education, studying to become a school teacher himself. Deanna could not have been more proud when, at 20 years old, Daniel accepted a position at the school she had founded years earlier, taking over some of her classes and bringing fresh energy and new ideas to the curriculum. But the greatest joy came when James announced that he was getting married. His bride was a sweet young woman named Emma, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and the love between them was so obvious that it made Deanna's heart ache with remembered happiness. She watched James with Emma and saw echoes of herself and Porter all those years ago, saw the same tenderness and respect and deep commitment. The wedding was held at the ranch on a perfect June day, with friends and family gathered from all over the territory. As Deanna watched James and Emma exchange vows under an arch decorated with wildflowers, Porter squeezed her hand and whispered, "This is what we built. This happiness, this family, this legacy. We did good, Deanna." "We did," Deanna agreed, tears streaming down her face. "We did very good indeed." Over the next few years, the family continued to grow. James and Emma had 3 children in quick succession, 2 boys and a girl, and Diana discovered the indescribable joy of being a grandmother. She loved watching Porter with his grandchildren, loved seeing him teach them to ride just as he had taught their father, loved the way his face lit up when they called him Grandpa. Lily eventually married as well, to a fellow artist she met in Salt Lake City, and they settled in a small cabin on the ranch property where Lily could continue to paint the landscapes she loved. Daniel married a schoolteacher from a neighboring town, and they built a life together that balanced teaching and family in a way that Deanna deeply admired. As Deanna approached her 50th birthday, she often found herself reflecting on the long and winding road that had brought her to this place. More than 25 years had passed since that day when she had been shot in the streets of Circleville, since Porter Young had stepped out of the shadows and changed her life forever. 25 years of hard work and deep love, of building something real and lasting from nothing but determination and faith in each other. She thought about the woman she had been back then, terrified and wounded, and convinced that she could never be enough. She thought about how wrong she had been, how Porter had shown her that she was not just enough but everything. She thought about the words she had spoken in fear and desperation. "I can't be the woman you need." And she thought about Porter's response, the words that had become the foundation of their entire life together. "You're the woman I choose." He had chosen her and she had chosen him, and together they had built something beautiful. A family that spanned generations, a ranch that was known throughout the territory, a legacy of love and hard work that would continue long after they were gone. They had taken broken pieces and made them whole, had taken fear and transformed it into courage, had taken 2 lonely people and created a family that was the envy of everyone who knew them. On a warm evening in late summer, Deanna and Porter sat on the porch of the house they had built together all those years ago, watching the sun set over the red rock cliffs. They were older now, their hair gray and their faces lined with age, but their love had only deepened with time. Porter's hand was still warm and strong as it held hers, and his eyes still held that same tender look that made her heart skip a beat. "You remember the first time we sat here?" Porter asked, his voice rough with age but still carrying that note of quiet strength that Deanna loved. "Right after I asked you to marry me and you said yes, I remember," Deanna said. "I was so scared. I thought I was making a terrible mistake, that I would ruin your life somehow." Porter laughed, a warm sound that rumbled in his chest. "Instead, you made my life worth living. You gave me everything I ever wanted and so much more. A family, a purpose, a reason to wake up smiling every morning for almost 30 years. 28 years, Deanna corrected with a smile. "We've been married for 28 years, Porter Young, and I have loved every single day of them." "Even the hard days?" Porter asked. "The times when money was tight, or when the drought nearly killed the crops, or when the kids were sick and we were terrified." "Especially those days," Deanna said. "Because those were the days when we leaned on each other, when we proved that our love was strong enough to weather any storm. Those were the days when I knew, beyond any doubt, that I had made the right choice in marrying you." Porter pulled her close, and Diana rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened, and the first stars began to appear, surrounded by the sounds of their ranch, the distant whinnying of horses, the laughter of grandchildren playing in the yard, the soft murmur of conversation from the house where their children had gathered for dinner. "I would do it all again," Porter said quietly. "Every single moment, every choice, every challenge. If I had the chance to go back and change anything, I wouldn't. Because it all led to this, to you and me and this life we built together. And I can't imagine anything better." "Neither can I," Deanna said. She lifted her head and kissed him softly, a kiss that carried 30 years of love and commitment and partnership. "You're still the man I choose, Porter, today and always." "And you're still the woman I choose," Porter said, echoing the words he had spoken so long ago. "Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Because you're brave and strong and beautiful, and because you chose to build this life with me. That's all I ever needed, Deanna. Just you, choosing me, every single day." As the last light faded from the sky and the stars came out in full glory above the Utah desert, Diana and Porter Young sat together on their porch, holding each other close and counting their blessings. They had started with nothing but hope and determination, had faced challenges that would have broken lesser people, and had emerged victorious, not because they were perfect, but because they had chosen each other and never wavered in that choice. Their children were grown and thriving, following paths they had chosen for themselves with the same freedom and courage Deanna and Porter had modeled. Their grandchildren were healthy and happy, surrounded by love, and given every opportunity to become whoever they wanted to be. The ranch was prosperous and would continue to provide for generations to come. And most importantly, the love that had brought them together all those years ago was still burning bright, a constant flame that neither time nor hardship could extinguish. This was their legacy, Deanna thought. Not wealth or status or social standing, but love. Love that chose freely and gave generously. Love that built up rather than tore down. Love that made room for growth and change and becoming. Love that said, "You're enough," and meant it. Love that stood firm in the face of every challenge. Love that transformed two broken people into something whole and beautiful. As Porter pressed a kiss to the top of her head and whispered, "I love you," into the darkness, Deanna smiled and whispered back, "I love you too, always and forever." And under the vast Utah sky, surrounded by the red rock cliffs that had witnessed their entire journey, Deanna and Porter Young held each other close and knew, with absolute certainty, that they had found exactly what they were meant to find. Not perfection, but something far more valuable. A love that was real, a partnership that was equal, and a life that was entirely their own, built on the foundation of one simple truth. She was the woman he chose, and he was the man she chose, and that choice had made all the difference.